Yeah, that is something that I think this must be a way to spin it, right? Well, certainly it has been. When we think of the fact that the president didn't have a policy going when they first used them, allegedly, didn't act till a couple months later on the reports of that, said reportedly the red line was an offhanded remark, and now, through the contradictions, through the misstatements, and Putin coming in, the idea is, hey, this worked out. And see, I threatened military force, but we know that's not true because the threat of military force didn't bring the Russians to the tables, nor did the. It wasn't by design. He fell into it. Now you say, well, Crane, what does that matter, man? This is America. You're an American. He's our president. He got what he wanted. Not really. And that's the problem. K.T. McFarland, former National Security Advisor to President Reagan, among others, weighed in on this, as well as Andrew C. McCarthy on Lou Dobbs the other night. And she outlined a number of reasons why this doesn't work for our national security. And in fact, the idea that the Russians are going to help us, well, then we have to forget what Russia has been and is. Roll it. All right, so we will get that going when we can. Bottom line, when we have a situation where we are seeing the short-term no pain, no pain, no pain, no accountability, no accountability, it may not impact us right now. But think about this. Iranian's nuclear program, they are a client of Russia, by the way, and their ability to put in anti-aircraft missile technology, top-notch, from Russia. And the idea that they are not working and continuing to accelerate their work in a nuclear weapon, and what that means in the entire dynamic of when and what they can project. You say, Crane, they haven't really done much. No, they're second only to Al-Qaeda in the amount of Americans they've killed. You say the Shia-Sunni divide, Crane, come on, man. Why are you worried about it? Well, they fund 40% of Hamas. Hamas is Sunni. So wait a second. That doesn't make... Oh, yeah, and they've talked about wiping Israel off the map. And then us. And that would be little Satan, big Satan, respectively. So I think this is a game changer. There are consequences to this. And so the short term, you can put the spin on it, but pretty much you're putting a lot of stew there, bunny style, and it's unfortunate because that fertilizer, what grows out of that is a weakened United States and a message to our allies that we cannot be counted on and we are not interested in using military force at all. And it sends a message to our enemies, hey, you will not be held to account. Big time problem. A lot of ways to go with the Syrian debate. We've talked about that. Third option, of course, Dr. Waleed Fairs, Ryan Morrow, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, all discussing that. We'll have that conversation for another time, but want you to know that in discussing an issue where you can say no pain, it's much like economically, you can put a stimulus out there and you can keep the pumps going, printing money. Yeah, not so gentle, Ben, when it comes to the purchasing program of mortgage-backed securities. Has said, no, we're going to keep going. We haven't reached our goal because of the employment numbers and the economy's still soft. So we're going to keep pumping money, keep in the attempt to keep interest rates down, which have jacked up just a little on the statements previous. That all said, you may give yourself a pain reliever, but you're not addressing the problem. And when we look at the Iranian regime, to extend the metaphor on health, the Iranian regime is a cancer, and they are deadly, and they are growing more lethal. So, short term, yeah. We had short term, didn't we have short term peace in our time? Yeah, that was great. Yeah. Sure, Sudanland. Yeah, we'll do that. That's fine. Okay, Hitler's not interested in anything else. Don't worry about it. So, misinformation, disinformation. How are we doing on the clips? Are they out for a while? Okay, so we will see what happens there. But we've heard of misinformation and disinformation campaign a fair amount on the shooting at the Navy Yard. 12 dead, 13, including the shooter. That would be Aaron Alexis. He was mentally unstable. There was a long record of this. He was breaking the gun laws in D.C., so those of people who say, hey, look, the law could have stopped it, not really. And there's really no accountability because the mental health concerns were never put into a place where they would show up on a federal background check. And in that, we have a problem because gun control advocates have continued to say, hey, this AR-15 is the killer, and we can really demonize it, but it wasn't an AR-15, it was a shotgun, and he picked up 2 other weapons from the base, on the base. So he came in with 1, picked up 2 more, and there you have the problem. What the problem was, arguably, and Dr. Zuhdi Jasser spoke to this, a veteran, Navy, familiar with the base policy in 1993 of disarming servicemen and women regarding their ability to carry arms, and that put people into a position other than the guards that were taken out. Well, excuse me, pardon my phrasing there, but killed, murdered. One was shot in the head, and what do we have? We had people without arms in a gun-free zone, which is, if you look historically, you can see that, be it John Lott, who's pointed this out, as well as Dave Capel at the Independence Institute, they've all but one of the mass shootings has taken place there. So, wow, you can see a pattern, and I think that's important to establish patterns. And those who want the problem to go away, well, they will advance their agenda, but they won't do it honestly. Not all, mind you. There are people who are honest, who believe in gun control and will say, hey, you know what? I know more guns, less crime. I know about that. I know the fact that guns are used as a deterrent for legal citizens purchasing them and the recognition of the criminal. And they're used hundreds of thousands of times a year to defend themselves from criminals. And I know that about 80% are either attained through a friend or stolen illegally. And so when you talk about the purchase of the gun, when you look at background checks on the whole, Daily Caller did a great piece on this. It was about 1%. So gun shows, the gun show loophole. So a lot of things are red herrings, and then there's distortions of the record, and then we have to go with the idea that it's an AR-15 when it's not. And when I think of AR-15, I think of the AR-15, I think of the Korean shop owners and the riot. But it goes to what you trust and what you believe. Now, there are those who will advocate for a complete gun ban and say that's going to help. That really doesn't work out too well because common sense will tell you with the amount of guns, 300 million, we have an extraordinary amount of gun owners in the United States. And if you have that many, you're not going to get rid of them. And then if they're illegal, they'll fall into the hands of a criminal, and the citizen will be without, because the criminal's going to get the gun anyway. That's the problem to that. So here's the overall point. The point is, the argument for gun control, though obviously people are passionate about it, they have to ask themselves, does it solve the problem? What does history and the record tell us? And then you say, well, it doesn't. What does? Trusting Americans with their freedom. And that's the truth. Oh, by the way, it wasn't sequester either. I'll tell you about that a little later. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, proudly on AFR Talk.
There's nothing like being a Share-a-thon volunteer.
You come here to volunteer, but what you get is so much more in return.
It's just been a great blessing to meet people from all over the country.
I'm just so overwhelmed at the opportunity to get to know more people in our family.
Our fall Share-a-thon is coming up October 22nd through the 24th in Tupelo, Mississippi, and we'd love for you to join us in answering phones. To sign up, simply call 800-326-4543, extension 204 during normal business hours.
It's been such a blessing to hear people call in. The DJs have spoken a word or prayed in something that they said God used it to minister to their heart.
It's great to be here. I encourage anyone and everyone that listens to take some time out and just come and be a part of it. It's a great experience.
Call 800-326-4543, extension 204 during normal business hours, or visit afr.net.
C.S. Lewis died on November 22nd, 1963, the same day as John F. Kennedy, 50 years ago this fall. Lewis was not only one of the great minds of the 20th century, but he was also the writer of the children's series, The Chronicles of Narnia. He was an unapologetic Christian and a winsome defender of the faith. C.S. Lewis has influenced millions for good through his writings. He awakens not only the mind, but also the heart. He cultivates not only our rational side, but also our romantic side as well. With profound gratitude to God for his gift to us in the writings of C.S. Lewis, we'll be gathering for the Desiring God National Conference this fall in Minneapolis, and we'd love to have you join us. It's September 27 to 29 at the Minneapolis Convention Center, and our theme is The Romantic Rationalist, God, Life, and Imagination in the Work of C.S. Lewis. Our speakers include John Piper, Phil Ryken, Douglas Wilson, Kevin Van Hooser, and Randy Alcorn. For more information and to register, visit desiringgod.org or desiringgod.org/Lewis.
It seems that some in America's business sector have a crisis of character. Corporate scandals have left us wondering whom we can trust. But you don't have to worry about your charitable giving. Trust the ministry that has the ECFA seal. The Evangelical Council for Financial Accountability, or ECFA, reviews nearly 1,100 Christian nonprofit groups each year. They only award their seal of approval to those that meet its rigorous standards. There is someone you can trust. The ministry that has the ECFA seal. Find out more. Go to www.ecfa.org.
AFR Talk.
AFR Talk.
We'd like to hear how God has used AFR Talk in your life. Has He motivated you to become engaged in the culture war? Has He used AFR Talk to help you grow as a Christian? Call us and share your story. We might use it on the air during our upcoming Share-a-thon. Here's the number, 800-326-4543, option 8. 800-326-4543, option 8. God is using AFR Talk. What's your story?
AFR Talk.
AFR Talk.
This is Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth.
Welcome back. We're figuring things out. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth, proudly on. Say it with me now, AFR Talk. Now, I'll get on the old Facebook and make sure you have an opportunity to comment on today's stories. And good news, we are moving ahead. Buzz Jacobs is going to be with us a little later on this hour. Benghazi 9/11. Now, why would you want to hear from Buzz? Well, he's the co-director of Benghazi 9/11. And as we've been talking about, the only reason this story keeps going is not because Congress has been terribly efficient in following it and coming together and getting testimony and getting to the bottom of it with a select committee. No, they haven't. It's been called for, but they haven't. They've had 4 separate investigations, and they're not sharing information. And you know how people can run out the clock when they don't want to answer, like Lois Lerner. Well, she didn't run out the clock. She just ran out. Oh, I've got the IRS update too. And so we will talk about those scandals. And yes, they are scandals because we have people knowingly misleading the American people, be it the IRS and members of the IRS, as well as members of Congress and even the president with the encouragement through a wink, wink, eye idea, and also speaking to specific things when it came to the threats to democracy. And you see the statements made and the behavior of 80% of them, by the way, targeted conservative groups. I want to point that out because I realize some of you just do not agree with me ideologically. You're just so far to the left, or just maybe, Crane, you're so far to the right, and then maybe you're in the middle, and that's okay too. Just like when we are describing these things not as R's or D's or conservatives or liberals, the American people, your government targeted a specific group based on their ideology. And it was 80%. 80% were conservative groups, Tea Party, pro-life, pro-Israel. You get the picture. Now you say, well, those are people I disagree with if you're on the left. But you have to reconcile the fact is, if a government can do that and you're allowing it to happen, then one day it might happen to you. And will that make it any less wrong? I would say no. I would say it's just as wrong, just as bad. I think you can drop the R and D, and you can say this is corruption, and it can be used against me. But then you got to start thinking yourself as an American, and not as a Democrat or a Republican or conservative or liberal. And then when you're evaluating these things, you got to say, okay, well, if that's the case, then when the president lies to the American people about that, or members of his administration are not being forthcoming, or when the president lies and we're Americans, right, first. Now you could say, I'm a Christian first always, but as a American citizen, I'm an American. And not a conservative, not a liberal, not a Republican, not a Democrat, not an independent, an American. And our ambassador and 3 other brave Americans are slaughtered by terrorists. And you're lied to about that. Does that bother you at all? Now you can go to the ends of the earth and do the gymnastics on the record and try to twist and turn things so that you can find some way to believe somebody when they're not telling the truth and it's clear, the record versus what was said at the time. You can do that, but then you're just a fool, aren't you? I mean, think about it. That means, or you could have the idea, and I'm not trying to be a name caller. I'm just trying to say, hey, look, if you are so desperate to believe somebody that you will confuse and delude yourself to the point where you have to, in essence, distort and lie to yourself, well, that's fine, but then you got a problem, right? I mean, or if you're somebody who says, you know what, I agree with President Obama and the way he handles things and the policy, so therefore what he can do, he can do, and he's a person I agree with, so he can break the law. He can lie to the American people. It's okay because he's my team. And then I would say you really don't believe in what this country stands for, and you don't understand it. And you can disagree, but, I mean, you more line up with a Putin-run government or a Castro or a Iranian regime, for that matter. Maybe Kim Jong-il style. And then I would ask, does that square biblically with you and your relationship with God? I don't want to go into your kitchen there. That's not my goal. I'm saying, look, if you see behavior that is illegal, that is wrong, that is your leadership lying to you, and you think that's acceptable, then you must agree to the fact that if it's acceptable in the people you support, it's just as acceptable for people you disagree with. And then you're not really interested in a government that's held accountable and achieves this authority through the consent of the governed. No, you're not. You're not into checks and balances. You're just into power. A lot of times when we are discussing these matters, of course, it does get a bit frustrating because there are times I will sit back and look at what's going on today, and frustration, my flesh takes over. Really, Crane? Thanks, Captain Obvious. No, I say this for a reason. I have conversations with people I disagree with a lot. Sometimes on air, sometimes in my personal life, and obviously 90 minutes, so I have a lot in my personal life. I seek people who disagree with me, and find out what they have to say. Now, a good thing about that is when you're talking to somebody, you can give them the benefit of the doubt of their motives. And that's what we should do, because otherwise it's conjecture. Unless, of course, the evidence clearly points to it. And then you've got to reconcile, we'll know them by their fruits, and we won't make judgments, but here's the impact of the policy or impact of what they've done. That said, when we go back and forth, we're discussing it, I find the fact that many on the left want the same things as many on the right. They don't want elections to be based on how many resources one has. They want it to be based on an ideological conversation and debate, and believe that government has too much power as it is. They believe in protecting people who can't protect themselves. Now, that gets pretty gamey when you talk about abortion, right? Because then you're dealing with a block that they've put in to say it's cosmic goo and not a life. Now, through conversation and through science, that's changing, obviously, and we're called anti-science. Isn't that interesting? Those of us on the right. You're anti-science. No, it's not cosmic goo, it's a life, and they feel pain, and we want to protect life, and you want to protect life. And then it goes into that, and it goes into a whole host of things about government power. And then we can take that to the issue of, do you want the government power to allow people to kill those that they have control over and cannot fend for themselves? And then we deal with euthanasia, and we also deal with abortion. But I digress. One of the problems with the way the debates are characterized is the way that we're characterized as conservatives, as those who defend marriage between a man and a woman, and have won the debate in the vast majority of states where they have protected that. As Christians who believe in God, but recognize that others may not, but we want that opportunity to be salt and light and speak truth and love. We desire that. We don't view it as hateful to exercise our faith. Hateful would be subjugating others and genital mutilation and a two-tiered system for believers and non-believers in the sense of a government that is a theocracy. But that's Islam, and we can get to that some other time. I believe that we can have that conversation. But when we speak to the issue of faith and what we believe and what we stand for, it's rare that you can turn on a cable network or a mainstream or a network and get a fair characterization of people standing up for what they believe. They portray Tea Partiers as Occupy Wall Streeters, as people that don't have concern for the law, as people that believe in violence and have used it. People are racist. Yeah, I just think they get the titles mixed up. OWS versus Tea Party. I mean, it's a little confusing. I mean, one cleans up, goes by the rule of law. The other, in a group, generally speaking, and we've seen this, has racism, has the idea of not actually solving the problem, doesn't believe in the Constitution. But again, I digress. I'm talking about the presentation of ideas here. We're trying to have a conversation. I know there's a lot on the agenda. I know that we have to go through things, and there have been numerous stories today. I've mentioned a few, from Gentle Ben Bernanke, not so gentle Ben Bernanke, to the situation with Benghazi and the hearing today and the statement made by the State Department, or the continuing resolution that's going to be put forth and the strategy overall to defund Obamacare, even the statements made about the Affordable Care Act, and Hans von Spakovsky joining us. But yet I think part of this is also a perception that we have and that people have of conservatives. And we go to Aaron Sorkin, a very popular, very successful television writer. He has done some great work with the West Wing, people have said. I think some of the stuff that he's done with dialogue has been great. He's obviously very talented. Here, he has a show on HBO, and it's Jeff Daniels playing a Republican, ostensibly conservative, O'Reilly-type news anchor, and his view on what it means to be a Republican. He's asked about it as they sit behind the set on his news program. And here is just a scene from that particular show. Roll it.
Who did you vote for today?
You know I'm not answering that.
Well, I thought you might because you revealed your party affiliation on the air last year.
I did. I identified myself as a Republican because I thought it was fair to give the viewer, given the commentary I was delivering.
A commentary that ended with you calling the Tea Party the American Taliban.
Yes.
And in the body of the commentary, it was a blistering indictment of Republicans.
Exactly the opposite. It was a blistering indictment of people who aren't Republicans.
Well, who's to say who is
That
and
night,
isn't?
I did.
I want to remind you, you asked me to pursue this area.
I understand.
And I'm wondering, with all respect, do you call yourself a Republican so you can make a claim to credibility when you attack the GOP?
No, I call myself a Republican because I am one. I believe in market solutions, and I believe in common sense realities and the necessity to defend ourselves against a dangerous world, and that's about it. Problem is now I have to be homophobic. I have to count the number of times people go to church. I have to deny facts and think scientific research is a long con. I have to think poor people are getting a sweet ride. And I have to have such a stunning inferiority complex that I fear education and intellect in the 21st century. But most of all, the biggest new requirement, really, the only requirement, is that I have to hate Democrats.
And that is oftentimes the characterization of Republicans. And you can go through the line. And I mentioned even in previewing that clip. Now, why is this important? Crane, why do you care? Why do you care what others think? Why do you care about because we're having to transform, we're called upon to transform the world. Well, we better understand the world and what we're dealing with. And that doesn't mean we compromise our principles, but it certainly means that we use our freedoms to express who we are and what we stand for. And when they're mischaracterized, which they're inevitably going to be, we continue to speak truth in love and tell people what we truly stand for. I don't think we are getting a fair shake, but life isn't fair. You think life is fair? Of course it's not fair. So what do we do with it? I mean, think about it right now. Why am I having this conversation with you right now? It's because we've reached a threshold where many have said, tune out, we're done. It's over. It's over, Crane. The battle, the war has been lost. And I don't know when the time will be when it is truly over. I do know who wins. And as a Christian, fallen as they come, and as Lord Jesus Christ as my Savior, and it's His grace that is given to me, and no better in the eyes of God than anybody else, I say, I am grateful for that relationship and knowing that truth and people not giving up and being in my life who did not give up on me. I also think of the children in the womb that are being killed who don't have a voice. I think of Crane Durham years back who made the very statement that, hey, you know, I'm pro-life for myself, pro-choice for others. And I had a friend of mine, Todd, I've told it many a time, who challenged me and started taking me to church and explaining where I was going wrong. If I believed it's life, it's life, it's life, and exceptions, no, I do not believe in exceptions because it is life. But I also believe the fact that that's going to take a conversation and changing the hearts and minds so people can believe in the law as opposed to just oppose it and never really take on what it means to appreciate that it is life. See, I don't believe it's over. I don't think you do either, because you're listening right now. I think you know that the battle's ongoing, and the people that don't have a voice deserve one. I think the battle's ongoing, that we still live in a country where we can talk about our faith. And our greatest example, something that drowns out all our words and speaks louder, are our actions of how we deal with that. Now, this is not sanctimonious in the sense of I'm putting myself up as self-righteousness. No, I am only righteous through the righteousness of Christ. That's all, and no better. He is righteous. I am not. My flesh certainly. But I must say that we are still free and we still have the ability to engage. Don't give up on those that disagree with you. And don't get caught up in reaction. Know where you're going and know that you're speaking truth, but do it in love. I've got to remind myself of that now and again. AFR Talk. Buzz Jacobs next.